I'll start since I guess we're waiting to see what it is I'm going to say. My first question is for Ken. Ken, I was looking in today's newspaper, and I saw there's an article on this. Did you see it?
Yes, I did.
Is it typical, let me ask Steve. Steve, is it typical for staff to make statements to the papers about the propriety or impropriety of particular issues that are before the council for a vote? In other words, should staff be weighing in on the merits of a debate that has not yet come before the council for a vote?
Well, obviously, it's a little bit awkward when staff does that. So normally, we're not asked those kind of questions.
But should staff do it? If somebody came to you today and said, Steve, should the council vote yes or no on this, and you gave a quote that ended up in the paper, would it not
say that.
wait, hang on, well, let me give you the hypothetical. Would it not taint the opinion of the staff work that was done leading up to the city council hearing, that staff had already predetermined what the outcome of a particular hearing should be?
Yes, it would.
Absolutely. Ken, would you ever make such a statement? Do you think it's a good idea to make such a statement when you're here presenting staff reports to us as a council who are asked to vote on things to the public, that you think we should vote a particular way or not a particular way? Do you think that biases the way that the public would view your staff work?
I would agree with you completely, yes.
Well, I have to say that I am particularly disappointed that we had staff making comments to the papers today, and the one that bothers me the most is the last one. The quote is, as various cities adopt restrictions and different ways of doing things, it creates a ripple effect. It's more than just Hermosa, one small bit city by the beach. Well, I got to tell you, before I get into any of the issues that are involved in the staff report, that staff is giving quotes to the paper about what we should or shouldn't do. Seems to me like the dog is wagging, or the tail is wagging the dog, and I have to tell you in the strongest terms possible that, for me at least, this is unacceptable, completely unacceptable, because I have said from the outset that I think this polystyrene has literally been, an albatross. We have talked about this now the fourth time. There are things in this city that are massively more important than this that we haven't whispered a peep about. But apparently I know the reason why now. It's not because of anything that the elected officials want. Apparently staff wants this. And that ain't right. Staff doesn't run the city. You can, Ken, I know that this is an awkward thing, but at least for me, someone who has one of the 5 votes that is supposed to make decisions about what happens here in Hermosa Beach, I'm led to the conclusion that I'm merely being brought along for the ride. The decision's already been made. That ain't the way that this is supposed to work. I sincerely believe in the chain of command. I think staff works for the council. I think it is staff's job to present objective, unbiased information to this city council so that it can make the best decisions possible. And in this case, clearly, that was not done. And I don't have to even do anything more than go to the quotes to show it. So we'll set that aside for now. Let's move on to the actual terms of the ordinance. Mr. City Attorney, let me ask your opinion on a couple of things here. Let's move on to section, let's see here, 8.64020B. It says, all, I'm reading, this is now the third sentence in subsection B, all facility rental agreements for any city facility shall include a provision requiring contracting parties to assume responsibility for presenting the utilization and or distribution of polystyrene food serviceware while using city facilities. The facility rental agreement shall indicate the violating contract's security deposit will be forfeited if the city manager or his or her designee determines that a polystyrene food serviceware was used in violation of the rental agreement. How much is the deposit that we generally ask for from people who come into the city and want to do certain things?
Well, it depends on the building. So it varies from about $100 to $500 for the theater.
And if 1 cup is used improperly, if an illegal cup is somehow smuggled into Hermosa Beach, and someone sees it, the way I read this, the city manager, who, Steve, it will not be you, but your likeness, can determine, if he sees that cup, that amount of money is forfeited. Is that not correct, Mr. Jenkins?
Well, this is not the actual contract language that would be in the contract. This is just the ordinance language that would direct us to prepare contract language. And
Well, stop me here. When I went to law school, will be forfeited doesn't mean could be forfeited or might be forfeited. Will means will be forfeited.
well, right. I was actually focusing more on the last phrase of the last sentence, which indicates that the city manager or his designee must determine that the polystyrene was used in violation of the rental agreement. I think one could certainly take the position that if an errant person happens to come in with a cup, that would not constitute use of the polystyrene in violation of the rental agreement.
Okay, but in fact, that's not what the ordinance says, is it? It says that the city manager in his sole discretion will make that determination. So no one's going to make an argument. If the city manager sees the cup, the forfeit occurs, right?
Well, I think that the city manager has a certain amount of discretion.
Okay, we'll move on. The subsection shall, I'm reading now section C, the second sentence. This subsection shall apply to the functions, organizers, agents of organizers, city contractors, food providers, and any other person that enters into an agreement with one or more of the function sponsors to sell or distribute prepared food or otherwise provide a service related to the function. So the way I read that, if I'm driving a bus and somebody contracts with me to drive a bus, and somebody else in, let's say, Fiesta Hermosa, uses polystyrene, that me, as the bus driver, because I am related to someone who is related to the service of the function, use polystyrene, that I could be accountable. Is that wrong?
If they're using or distributing the polystyrene food serviceware at a city-sponsored event.
Yes, so I'm not wrong.
Well, I think, again, let's just, A, it's very comprehensive, but B, if you're asking me if the driver of a delivery truck who delivers non-polystyrene foodware to a city-sponsored event happens to have a polystyrene coffee cup
Wait.
he's drinking coffee from, does that violate the ordinance? I would say no.
That's not what the ordinance says, though, is it? Because the ordinance says any person that enters into an agreement with one or more of the function sponsors, to sell or distribute.
Well, right. The second sentence has to be read in the context of the first sentence. The first sentence says no person shall use or distribute. And then what it says is this applies basically comprehensively to anyone who's involved in the process of using or distributing polystyrene food serviceware at city-sponsored events.
So what is it that would restrict if the cup comes into the city? Let's say the cup comes into the city. I happen to have my ramen noodles that I'm bringing into the city. The way I read this, that the sponsors and anyone related to the sponsors would be liable. I'm not asking the question anymore, but that's the way I read it. I know that you may have a different interpretation, as you must, but certainly somebody else could read this at another night with a different city manager and find that I am not incorrect. I'm looking now at section 8.64030, exemptions. And it looks like, again, we're vesting the city manager with a tremendous amount of discretion here to unilaterally dole out exemptions. I wonder why we do that, but I don't know the reasons for that, again. Maybe staff would. But the thing that I'm most concerned with is 8.64020, and this coincides with one of the letters we got today. That section says that no one shall bring, section 8.64020 shall not apply to individuals bringing food for personal consumption at city facilities, including but not limited to city parks and the beach, provided the facility is being used for individual recreation or similar purposes, and such facility is not part of a larger organized event that is otherwise governed by the section. So as I read that, what that tells me is you can't buy anything in polystyrene here in Hermosa Beach. So, for example, I go down to get a taco and I want to walk down to the beach. I can't buy that taco here in Hermosa in a polystyrene container, obviously. But I certainly could buy one in Redondo and bring it over here. I could buy one in Manhattan and bring it over here. So at the end of the day, unless it was litter, because I think ultimately I'll talk about this when we close, but it's a littering issue. We're not stopping people from bringing it into the city. We're just stopping our businesses from using it. So has anyone done any study? Has staff done a study to determine how much of a fiscal impact this will have on the individual businesses in town? Ken?
A detailed fiscal impact study? No, we have not.
Okay. Has anyone done any study to determine the polystyrene that ends up on our beach, where it originates from? How could you do that? How do you know that a piece of polystyrene on Hermosa Beach didn't come from Manhattan? How do you know?
You wouldn't know.
How do you know when somebody brings a cup in and that cup is left on the side of the road where that cup was purchased? How would you know? Ken?
I don't have a good answer to that, Councilman.
Okay, well, these are all issues that I find fascinating, but this is the one that I find absolutely troubling, disappointing, and again, I think entirely consistent with this council's past actions. Mr. City Attorney, I'm looking now at 8.64040, enforcement and compliance. The city manager and his or her designee shall have primary responsibility for enforcement of this chapter. So, Steve, your reasonable likeness will be responsible for going around and patrolling for cups and plastic and the rest of it. Sole responsibility, I assume then that sole responsibility would be designated on to the police. So once again, we have the police enforcing environmental laws. The city manager and his or her designee is authorized to promulgate regulations and to take any and all other actions reasonable and necessary to enforce this chapter, including but not limited to inspecting any food provider's premises to verify compliance. I'm thinking of a day in Hermosa Beach when you get a tip. We're not in Pyongyang or Moscow or Havana. We're in Hermosa Beach where you get a tip that someone has smuggled in some polystyrene. The way I read this, you would get a cop and you would go down, apparently without any kind of warrant or anything, and look for it. Is that right? City Attorney, is that right?
Well, not exactly. I suspect that if there is evidence that a restaurant, for example, is serving food or serving takeout or leftovers.
Stop. Let me give you the hypothetical.
It would be fairly evident.
Okay. Steve gets a tip. I just came from Restaurant X and they served me my burrito in polystyrene. Somebody else says the next day, I just came from Restaurant X down somewhere in Hermosa, a little mom and pop shop, and they served me my tacos in polystyrene. Mr. City Attorney, does the city manager now in his authority under this ordinance have, I guess it'd be probable cause, to go down with the police and inspect to see if that business is still using polystyrene?
Well, I think that the first thing we might do is send an officer down to buy a taco or
so we do an undercover work first.
And see if they get served in polystyrene.
Let's say they do. Then what?
Then they might get a warning.
They might. Does it say in here about giving warnings?
Well, we generally reserve the discretion to give a warning before we issue a citation. That's fairly common in code enforcement. in prosecution generally.
Okay, but answer my question now.
Sure.
Could the city manager go down with a police officer without a warrant, any probable, other than the probable cause of the tip, and do an unwarranted inspection of someone's property?
If the premises are open to the public, such
The
as a takeout restaurant,
The kitchen.
and if the kitchen is not open to the public, you would need a warrant, and you'd need probable cause, and of course, we're able to obtain inspection warrants upon probable cause. And if we observe people leaving the restaurant with polystyrene containers, that would constitute probable cause.
So then we'd go
get a warrant.
We'd go, the way it would work, and stop me where I go off the tracks, is we'd find somebody, we'd have an attorney go down with the officer who has now done I just can't even believe I'm saying these words, an undercover polystyrene buy, present the information to a judge in chambers, and would be issued a warrant to enter upon someone's property to seize the polystyrene. Is that right?
Maybe, but maybe not. It may be that the evidence of observing patrons leaving with polystyrene is sufficient evidence that a warrant is not necessary.
Okay. So in any event, what I'm gathering from this, and I mean, again, stop me where I go off the tracks, is that we're going to have police officers staking out restaurants looking for polystyrene. Is that, well, can you at least agree with me on that?
Well, actually, I'm really trying to find an area where we can agree, but this is not there's no criminal violations here. It's a civil violation.
Hang on.
We would not be using police, really, for this. We'd be using code enforcement.
Okay, code enforcement, but let's say code enforcement couldn't gain compliance. Everything I just talked about getting probable cause after doing an undercover polystyrene buy is absolutely accurate, isn't it?
Well, typically, let's say we got to the point...
Answer my question,
What's
please.
your question?
Is what I just said about going to get a warrant, which you took me down that path, is that not accurate?
It could happen.
It could happen.
It could
Thank you.
theoretically.
Okay, let's stop with that. I guess that's as good as you're going to do for me. Any and all other actions. Could we refuse to issue a business that we had reports that they were using contraband polystyrene? Could we refuse to issue them a business license?
I believe so, yes.
So how many times do you need to get caught with a cup before you're not allowed to do business in Hermosa Beach?
Well, we would need to have, obviously, substantial evidence of a violation.
Okay,
before we
2
would
times?
do that.
2 times?
The ordinance doesn't specify.
5 times? 10? What if I do it once a month? Is that enough? I'm asking.
The ordinance doesn't specify.
You're right, it doesn't specify. Who would make that determination? It'd be the city manager in his own discretion, right?
That's correct.
So let's imagine that the city manager decides that, boy, he just really doesn't like that business. Is 2 enough for him? You don't need to answer that. How about fines? Are fines any and all?
Are they what?
Is a fine any and all?
No, the fines are specified in our code based on the number of violations per 12-month period.
How many violations does it take before I get fined?
Well, after a warning, you mean?
I don't see any place in here that talks about warnings, but I'll take it on your good word that a warning would be issued. Not in the ordinance. Not in the ordinance.
Right. So the first citation would be for a $100 penalty.
Okay,
$100
so
fine.
I get caught I've smuggled up some contraband styrofoam from Redondo Beach, and I get caught with it peddling polystyrene. And that's worth $100. The second time I get caught, how much is that?
My recollection is it's 200,
Third time?
500.
And after the 500, can I go? Let me ask you the question.
Or third and after, within a 12-month period, it's 500.
500. At any point when I'm caught again with my contraband styrofoam from Redondo Beach, could I be subjected to jail?
No.
There's no misdemeanor here?
Well,
Any and all?
the answer is if you violate the administrative penalty provisions more than 3 times in a 12-month period, the city can then file a misdemeanor prosecution.
That's right, they can, can't they? And the misdemeanor prosecution could be $1,000 up to 5 days incarceration, could it not?
Well, no, it could be more than that, actually. It could be up to 6 months in jail.
That's why I'm not a prosecutor. Let's go way out here now, hypothetically, and I am a real heavy-duty contraband polystyrene smuggler from Redondo Beach, and I've got a pipeline, I've got a distribution network. The cops have staked me out, and they see that I'm bringing in cups by the dozen daily. I'm just a bad actor. At some point, could the city decide to shut me down as a nuisance?
Nuisance abatement is an available remedy.
So the legal transformation of that is yes, right?
The ordinance says that the remedies are cumulative, they're not exclusive. If it qualifies as a nuisance, our code would allow for abatement as a nuisance, yes.
So I could be abated. I could actually have someone file an action against me, the same action, by the way, nuisance abatement, that's filed against houses of ill repute, drug dens, houses that are not upkept, trash, hoarders, people who keep too many animals, people who have broken down cars, people who have homes that are in disrepair because they're either unable or incapable of caring for them. All of those things that I've just mentioned, now you can put into that group of things someone who uses styrofoam cups habitually.
Well, qualified, yes. Someone who uses or distributes polystyrene ware in violation of this ordinance, the answer is yes. Not someone who has a cup of
As a
coffee
personal
for personal use.
Personal use.
I'm assuming your statement is somebody who's in the business.
I just said they were a really bad actor. They were a known smuggler. Okay. I think I've worn myself out. Thank you, Mike.
Sure. Any other questions?
Mayor.
Staff? Mayor Pro Tem Duclos.
Thank you. I don't even know where to begin, but I'm going to. I guess I first want to start by helping Mr. Robertson out, and because it's kind of hard to follow a lot of these comments, but the first one that, to the question, would you ever make such a statement, your response was, no, you would not. Now, when you say no, you're not, it means you never would ever make a statement that either might say something that might be construed one way or another in terms of being a favor or against something that's before council. Do you really feel comfortable making that statement?
Well, I was just answering his question directly.
Well, I know.
about
I'm trying to
speaking
give
the
you
merits. Right.
the opportunity here to...
Yeah, no,
Hold on.
Pam, just,
I'd rather, can I, like,
No, not at
Pam,
the
please,
moment.
Pam, please.
You'll have an opportunity.
Just,
well, I mean, I'd just like to put it in the context of what it was
No,
said.
just, it's fine.
So we'll
Just, you
we'll
have
have an opportunity later.
Well, Mr. Bobko thinks this is really funny.
I think this is illustrative
No,
of
no.
the problem.
All right,
I have...
the Mayor Pro Tem has
I
the
have
floor.
the floor, please.
He has the floor. Ask your question.
Point of order, please. So again, I'd say to you, this is an opportunity. Think about what you said. I understand the question was very pointed, and what you said is you would never say anything that might be interpreted that way.
Right.
You don't believe, you really don't believe that. It's possible. And that's almost, it's beyond human capability that you could make a statement that might somehow be misinterpreted or misrepresented. Well, no, this is an important point. And the other thing is that in the statement that was read by staff as being in favor of, I ask you to read that statement again. If you read the story again, I read that story, and I didn't read that as an advocate's position. She was making a statement of fact. I mean, there are more than 50 other California jurisdictions that basically have passed similar bans on polystyrene food containers in the state of California that have preceded us. So to say it's a ripple effect is a statement of fact. It is not a statement of her predisposition in terms of what's going on. She deals with facts. She stated a fact. And I think it's incredibly unfair to do this kind of, litigation from the podium up here. And I give Councilmember Bobko great props as being a great litigator. There's no question. We've all seen his skill here, and he's definitely got it. But what bothers me, and I see the gentleman back there writing, which is interesting because rarely the statements that refute the things that he says make it to print. Rarely. Because it's so compelling what he says. But he's painted this picture of this mondo world about an ordinance that, if you look at it on his face, is not something that should be so trivialized, that deals with a serious problem that's been habitual for years and years and years, that an industry fails to correct. And all I would ask that those of you who are covering this case, and those of you who are hearing it, because I know there's people out here tonight who can speak to this matter with some very good facts and information as to the nature of the problem, and I think that they need to be heard. Any other questions to staff? I'm going to give a little extra time so Councilman Bobko might want to have more questions. Okay. I don't want to step on your toes. Okay. I'll close the questions. I'm going to turn it over to the audience. This is a public hearing, so I welcome any input, comments from anybody in the public. Feel free to come up.
Can I please come up?
We have a speaker. You want to do
Bill, would you defer to me? Thank you. What? May I come up? Can I be recognized? I mean, I think that it's...
I'm going to ask the city manager if you feel that it's appropriate for staff, or if you're...
Well, would you, since I'm being attacked.
Well, I really wish we weren't doing this. I don't think it helps, and that's the real problem. That's my attitude about it, and...
Well, I would like to...
I understand.
On your last day, I just like to say, what question I was asked, so that...
That was what I was going to say. I don't know what the question was asked. I don't know what the quote was, but let me say.
Well, but, okay, excuse me.
And I do think it's important, and I believe that we have a role of providing you guys information to make decisions about. We're not in a role of doing it. I don't think you're going to find this report as biased in any manner. But we can't control, just like you can, what questions are asked or how it's written. We have no idea. We didn't look into any of this. We didn't do any of this. It's all been taken at face value. And that's the part that's unfair. I've been terribly misquoted in newspapers, said exactly the opposite. And this reporters in this room that have taken written information, and we actually kid about it a bit, and they completely changed it and show them the next day, what did you write? Here it was. So I don't really know the answer.
Well, Steve, let me say one thing, because this is now moving out of where it needs to go. Number one, I never mentioned anyone's name. Ms. Townsend has identified herself.
Okay.
Number two, I made it very clear that the reason I was pointing this out was because it needed to be pointed out about the chain of command. And I know both of you, because that's why I asked you the questions, would you give these quotes? The first response should be no. The first response should be no. It is not staff's place to influence the public debate, period. It is not. It is the council's responsibility to vet the issues. And we rely on you to give us information. When staff starts weighing into the public arena,
I wasn't weighing into the public arena.
You are right now, because we are having this discussion. When staff weighs into the public...
But
I'm going to ask staff
I'm
to
sorry.
please sit down.
Well, I'd like to speak as a member of the
City
public
manager
then.
spoke, and you're here as staff, not as a member of the public. So I'm going to ask
Well,
you very
I would-
nicely to please sit down. We have a meeting to conduct. We got an opinion from our city manager. He did respond to the issue as to how things...
Could I just say one thing, please?
As a staff person, it's not appropriate, and if I let you do it, Pam, then I have to let any other staff person that has...
I know, but my integrity is being questioned and put on the public display.
I understand that, but your boss has basically responded...
Well, my boss knows what was asked of me, and I wish he would say what it was.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about the director.
Okay. 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 Well, and I'm going to finish my point now. When staff weighs into a realm of public arena, when staff walks into the arena of the ideas, they need to be prepared to defend their ideas. I never sit at this podium, at this dais, without the ability or willingness to defend whatever it is that I'm putting forward as an idea. Sometimes I win, and sometimes I lose. And I take a hell of a lot of smoke when I lose, as Mr. Cohen is here to attest. There's nowhere to hide. When staff moves out of being staff and starts making public comments, pro or con, about issues that are before this body, they have put themselves into the arena, and they need to be able to defend or willing to defend their ideas. That should not happen. It should never happen again. This conversation should be the only time this council ever has it. I hope that's the case. But be aware, if staff decides to wade into the arena, they need to be prepared to defend their ideas.
Clearly I've made a forceful point. But the thing that everyone needs to understand is I didn't make anything up. I'm just reading the ordinance. I'm not making these things up. I'm not creating anything. I'm not dreaming up a police state. We're doing it. So it's easy for you who serve on the Green Task Force and the others who are putting so much of their effort into this and energy, and I understand, but it's easy to be dismissive of me. It's easy, right? Easy to dismiss me. He likes styrofoam. He hates the beach. He's mean to staff. He's a jerk. He's a lawyer. He's a Republican. Go ahead, dismiss me. You can. But I take solace in the fact that I'm going to lose this vote. I'm one guy. I think this is going to be probably a 4-1 or a 3-2 vote. I'm not sure. But I'm going to lose, and you're mad at me. I'm not saying anything about pollution. I love the beach as much as anybody. I live here. I like to get in the water. I love to be on the beach. Who wants to pollute? Who wants to harm wildlife? Who wants the dolphins? For Pete's sake, who wants children coming up and telling me they don't want styrofoam in their sushi? Not me. Okay? So it's easy to dismiss the arguments. But here's the real nub of it, and here's the thing that bothers me. And the young lady from USC said it best, and again, if you're wading into the arena, thank you for coming. But I disagree with you completely. You said this isn't about politics. I think it's entirely about politics. This is only about politics, and here's why. Those of you who think this is the right thing to do cannot convince others that you are correct. Remember I talked earlier about the city staff coming in here and having, if they were going to wade into the arena, that they needed to be able to defend their ideas. So do you. And you can't. You can't convince everyone your ideas are right. And so what do? You do the thing that everyone does when they have power. They use force. They use force. Make no mistake, the reason you are so offended by what I said is because I pulled the curtain back on your application of force and showed you what it is. And what it is the city manager and the police and fines and jail time. That's what it is. And the reason you have to resort to those things is because you don't have a good enough argument to convince people. Your argument, and here's the killer, your argument is outstanding. You have a receptive audience. You have a receptive audience if you would just go out and present your case, but you won't. You know why you won't? Because it's easier to get 3 of us to do it by force. And that's the naked, sad truth of it all. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I oppose. I oppose the naked application of force because that's what it is. Now, it's a minor thing, maybe, but it's cumulative, isn't it? Because a couple of weeks ago, we said you can't smoke outside either. And I presented a hypothetical where I was walking down the Strand, not I, someone was walking down the Strand at midnight smoking a cigar, and a neighbor could see them do it and call the police and get them enjoined. Force. A couple of weeks before that, we decided that we wanted to take property from everyone and give it to a few people. And how do we do that? Well, it's not taking, is it? We call it a community garden, and then it's okay. The language of force and taking and power is always couched very comfortably. And this is what we're doing. I don't know what the next thing is, but I predict that soon we will probably see someone want to ban sugar, someone want to tell me how often I need to exercise, that if I choose to do something else unhealthy that I have to stop. When does it end? Apparently it doesn't. As long as we have a majority and the force of government behind us, we can do whatever the heck we want. And that's the problem. I oppose this. I oppose all of these things. I support what you're doing, but I wish you would do it the right way, which is convince people you're right. And you have a receptive audience here in Hermosa Beach because everybody agrees with you. That you're not willing to do it, I think, is sad. And again, I oppose this, and I'm sorry that I've offended. I certainly didn't mean to cause the young lady any discomfort, but the facts are what they are. They're stubborn things. So with that, I will oppose the motion, Mr. Mayor, and I thank you for the time.